Thank you, Ellis. And as you might imagine, Ellis's handler is also a poet, and so he would like to share something with you. Let's say hello to Ellis's dad, Jeff.
I kind of wish that, was it Doug who read before Ellis? I kind of wish he was reading my poem because he's got a much better voice than I do, but I'll read this one. It's called New Nails. Grandmother removed photos from the wall. She scrubbed the silver frames, etching her frustration into the metal. Harold had been a passionate man. Teddy Roosevelt looked undetermined by his side, smiling for the camera, shaking his hand, her on Harold's arm as he changed the tide. Harold had been a determined man. He promised this would be their winter home, a path from the back door to the white sand, expatriates living just outside of Rome. Instead, there was only love. Harold was a good man. On the edge of the Grand Canyon, each in one arm, the children not worried about where they could land. In their father's tight grasp, they would feel no harm. Grandmother put the pictures back on the wall, but not where they were. Things needed to change. The photos were moved to the other side, over the chair, not the couch, hung with new nails. That's that one. I'll do just one more short one. Surface emotion swimming. I encountered comfort with open arms, and I find the surface emotion swimming, while the depths slowly douse the pilot, enhancing the challenge of shedding light on the inequities of privilege. Rage is mellowed among the manicured, and I wonder, will I ever be outraged again, as the engine purrs and cozies in my lap for a lengthy siesta in manufactured solitude, where graduated men's eyes are covered.
I was thinking about the microphone thing when Ellis was up here. Everybody has a thing with the microphone. They don't really know what to do about it. It can be a little bit scary. I think Ellis has got the right approach. Just hold on to it for dear life. I also want to make you aware, you look very much like a rock star if you do what Ellis was doing. The other thing I want you to be aware of is that if you just pinch it right here, you can take it off. So if that makes you feel more comfortable, you're welcome to do it that way as well. But yeah, people who have been at this for 30, 40 years, are just as uncomfortable as you are about the mic. You just have to deal with it. Part of the gig, that there might be microphones involved. All right. So we're very happy to welcome this evening John Kay, who's a published poet and visual artist from Camas, Washington. He lives in Camas now. He grew up in Los Angeles, where he got to know Charles Bukowski, whose work continues to be an influence. Happen to know, I don't know if you know this, John, but we've got a lot of very pro-Bukowski people in town, yes. And we've actually had two people who knew Bukowski personally come to Ghost Town. One was Neely Tchaikovsky, who drove all the way from San Francisco to be here with us, and Charles Potts. And what was really funny was both of those gentlemen had Bukowski impressions to do, so no pressure, but it was fun. Yes, the third Bukowski influenced poet for sure. John Kay has an MFA in creative writing from the University of Arizona. He taught writing courses for the University of Maryland for 20 years and lived in Germany for 31 years. His most recent book, which is for sale here tonight, This Particular Kiss, was published this year by Pearl Editions in Long Beach, California. Please give a warm Ghost Town welcome to John Kay.
Thank you. I'm glad I didn't have to follow Ellis. You're going to hear from Ellis more, I guarantee it. And I'd like to thank, take a moment to thank Chris for making all of this happen and being so energetic, being a great poet, and keeping all of us alive. And I'm happy to now begin to become part of the poetry community. I think I'm stuck here. I'm not going back to Europe. I lived in Europe for 30 years in Germany, and the poems, and I struggle. I've been writing for 60 years probably, and teaching writing and doing a lot of different things. But I never really had my own style. I was highly influenced by Bukowski, as every poet in LA was at the time, just about, unless you were an academic poet. But I knew him personally and spent time with him, and he was too big of an influence, really. I had to break away from him. It took a long time. I had to get sick, is what happened. And I wound up in the hospital for, oh God knows, I had triple bypass, cancer, and then major depression. I was in the hospital for 2 months with depression. And when I got out, I realized I had a subject matter that was not going to be very popular. It wasn't going to be dancing in Piraeus. It wasn't going to, these were not going to be happy poems. That I had to talk about my experience with pain, with suffering, and mostly with loss, with the loss of sanity, with the loss of love, with the possibility of the loss of life over and over again. So the poems all suddenly became very dark. And I thought, maybe I shouldn't go there, but I have to. So what I tried to do is capture that experience without using ideas. My poems, I try to bring imagery as the primary means of expression rather than ideas. So this book came out about 5 years ago. This is the second book in a trilogy. It's called Phantom of the Apple. And this sort of chronicles the attempt to fill the hole, okay? The experiences with doctors and with life and death. In the book that just came out, this particular Kiss was really the first book, but it came out second, okay? It was waiting for a long time in a poetry contest and was the winner of the 24th Pearl Poetry Prize in California. So I made a contract with myself when I got out of the hospital that I was going to write short poems. It was at a time when I'd been writing very long poems, Bukowski-like poems, or Philip Levine-like poems, where I just let it all go. And Ted Kuser was the poet laureate at the time, and he was writing these short poems, and I thought, God, this guy's getting away with these short poems. And I've never written short poems before. They were always sort of elaborate poems. So I wrote my first 12-line poem, and I haven't written anything but a 12-line poem for, I don't know, the past 8 years maybe, or 10 years, about 250 of them. And still going, and I don't plan to, that's my contract with myself, 8 seem to fit, okay? So I had to whittle, I had to kind of carve everything down to the point that I could get it all in 8 lines, or 12 lines. Which was, in the beginning, a little bit difficult, but after a while, it became easy. Now, we have this great poet that, we honor every year, William Stafford, who had an idea about poetry that when you enter into or begin to write a poem, you don't necessarily need to know where you're going. Okay, you just get on the bus and it takes you to where you need to be. Okay, and I spent many years doing that, but then I shifted to just the opposite of that, because now I had a 12-line poem that I could hold in my mind, okay? So I would get, all of my poems are gifts in this series of 250 from people who suddenly begin to emerge, or things that emerged in television programs or stories I heard about loss. Okay, once I opened myself up to that, you would be amazed. It was like every day I was hearing stories from other people about their loss. So I would capture those stories many times, and I'd put them in the first person. I'd say, well, this, you know, it works better in the first person. Now, another thing that I did that was sort of new is that I began to play with person. When I'd write a poem, then I'd look at it and I'd say, does this poem work better in the first person or the third person? And I'd shift. So sometimes the first person, there's an I in the poem, and then sometimes it's the third person, but it's me. But I'm not the person in the poems necessarily, which is kind of different. Most poets write from a personal perspective. They're talking about their lives. I'm talking about my life, but I'm trying to do it within the context of the imagery of the poems. So, without relying on ideas, but more on imagery, here's a poem that I was thinking about as I sat there. It's called Wildcat Pilot Down. Now, it's only got 12 lines, so you got to catch it quick, right? All of these, I'm warning you because they come and go very quickly. But this is about a pilot who's floating in the water, okay? Sorry if I'm explaining the poem, but I want people to know what's happening very quickly. Because there are only 12 lines, I have to come to the poem late and get out early, okay? That's one of my goals, is to sometimes even cut the beginning of the poem to get it down to the right size. Treading water, treading time, blood tastes metallic. 10-story gunships rock, huddle, and fire like zero, and fire, while zeros gouge the charcoal sky, hurled drunkenly into the sea's skin. I cling to my stubborn plans for life as the sun drops like a coin into the Wurlitzer of night. Oil wildfires lighting the opera, then down to oblivion, calling each other. After, beneath a blanket of warm sand, I hear girls laughing in the waves. That's heaven. This was a poem written for a friend who died suddenly. He was a librarian who kind of turned me on to a lot of these contemporary novelists. It was an interesting experience I had with him in Germany. It's called Pinstriped Sleeve. I noticed cinnamon-spotted eggshells left behind like outgrown clothes beneath our cherry tree in the ferns and undergrowth. And now you go kicking off your deathbed sheets for an afterlife where you may heal from your death. Blood without poisons, homes without stars, nights without words. I dread your aftermath, your invisibility, grinding my heart on the stone of forever. Your memory, a folded bird, flutters out the pinstripe sleeve you left behind. I had a friend in Germany who gave me a lot of poems. He was another poet, and when he would talk, the poems would just come out of him, and I thought, oh my God, I gotta get that one, and this is one of them. It's called Obad. What I do is I got the basic idea, but then I have to, I rewrite these things over and over again, sometimes 40 or 50 times to get, because I only have 12 lines, I gotta get exactly the right word in the right place. There's no room for a mistake. And I even work very hard on the page of keeping the lines the same length. It's kind of I don't know, an obsession. But anyway, Obad. He gives her most of his money, sending her back to Moscow, wearing one red glove in a dimly lit train. Sipping Remy Martine in the station cafe, he remembers her worried hand, dipping sugar cubes into warm brandy, her broken English, her thin white body folding forward in a bed of plum blue sheets before opening into love. She leaves with all she ever gave. He drinks, clutching the other glove. Now, this is a poem I've never read. It's a two-part poem. It's the only two-part poem I've done. It's called, actually, so that makes it a long poem, doesn't it, with two parts? But they're both 12-liners. It's called Bonhoeffer's Slippers. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, some of you may know, was a Christian mystic who was picked up by the Nazis and eventually hung during the Second World War. A guard snaps, "Make ready," and he marches to the hanging tree in his gray slippers. Who of us can look into his eyes, or the thorny eyes of his God, without turning to the crows, circling with their final truth about an incomprehensible world? His feet calloused and frozen, yellowed, black, splotched against a dreadfully blue sky, to walk the earth nevermore. Part two, and now that it's a change or a shift in person here, to him speaking. Wind plucking the frets of my, Wind plucking the frets of my stubbly hair, sun on my face, as I tilt my head upwards, legs buckling from the warmth. I remember bouncing along the road with my childhood dog. With my childhood dog, scripture on my lips. But I can't go to heaven with these piddly words, can't die with such a sweet tasting mouth. I feel my slippers, my hand on your shoulder, see the fields rolling up to the sky. The Invisible Man. I used to walk around Heidelberg, which was the last place that we lived, almost every evening, and every once in a while I'd pick up something for a poem, an image or something. The Invisible Man. There's also a famous novel called The Invisible Man, same kind of idea, by Ralph Ellison, who is he still alive? Yeah. The half-eaten core pinched between two fingers, she approaches, eating a large green apple. I search her eyes as she passes, but she looks down, pouring them into the pavement. And in a few moments, I enter the wake of her perfume, her sweet scent of youth, clotting in a bowl of air, blending with the aroma of fresh green apples and the flakes of freshly fallen leaves underfoot. I remember how I kissed and kissed these girls when they poured their eyes into mine, not away. That's the loss of youth A simple wish for my son. It would be a silver bicycle with upright handlebars, a single gear, leather saddle, and he would descend the mountain through the village, sloping down to the sea. A youthful, slightly tarnished Apollo, destined to wrap his lights in the world, taking his roll of stars to the cantina, stringing them through the trees to the roof. Then, on a cloudless day, he'd be the star, turning the bend, riding along the waterfront, into the slightly bleached and grimy opening scene of an Italian movie. Another wish for my son, that at least once in broken-hearted glory you throw your body on the tracks, but pull yourself up when you hear the whistle. Then is that a typo? Yes, it's a typo, I think, or it's my vision. That T looks like an R. Okay, okay, it's okay. My vision's not that good for these. That you pull yourself up when you hear the whistle. That you eat snails and dirt. That you know sweat and the smells of body odor. That you climb something worth climbing. Find joy in drunken boats, that you bear up under the pain of life, leaving some skin, a man loving and loved in one. Here's another one for my son. After Hours horror story. And the Russian poet Joseph Brodsky has got a line here from the Russian poet Joseph Brodsky. Your dreams, my Telemachus, are blameless. My son straddles the doorway, his hair like windshield wipers, thrust into the frosty air so they don't freeze to the windshield. He's asking to take a job at a supermarket, shelving, for almost $9 an hour, stacking cans of Jolly Green Giant asparagus, loading freezers with chicken wings, lumpy bags of vegetables, instead of reading Yeats, dropping forever his trinomials and quadratics. Now this is a love poem written from the point of view of a blind woman. Okay? It's called The Gift. Cradling the oval of my face, like holding rare Murano glass, as if you might break it, thumbs smearing my lipstick, circling softly on my upper lip before resting on my cheekbones. Tender as you are, I ache, wondering if in your blindness you will touch enough of me to absorb the gift of my beauty. Touching my trembling eyelids, you are almost there. For my wife. Okay, so there are some positive poems here. There was a woman that came in where I worked in the education center in Germany with a suitcase full of scarves one day. And I was just really taken with that image, a suitcase full of scarves. She opened it up and it was filled with all of these beautiful scarves. She was trying to sell them to somebody at the counter there, a friend of hers. And there's a line from Jim Morrison's song here of The Doors. See if you can, if you hear it. So every once in a while I hear lines and I steal them or incorporate them. I feel like that's okay, as long as the poem's mine. The Istanbul Bazaar. She opens a cardboard suitcase, and in its mirror, you see yourself with Turkish scarves, tousled, teased, tossed into a froth of lavender peaches, blue lemons, and golden roses. She folds stars with the edge of her hand, knotting it loosely around your neck. Then we walk down the ancient hall to the labyrinthine chambers of brass serpents, where despair is in the light, ecstasy in the shadowed eye, and you, my darling, are the flower of the night. One of my few rhyming poems. Won't go on forever here. How about The Real Men? I get a little flack for this poem, but I like it. It was recently published in, I should have the name of this magazine. This is the last one I got published. Alvarez is the editor. Yeah, from California, I'm sorry. The Real Men. It's about fishermen and about real men that I saw as a child. Okay? Long poles, green rubber waders. The fishermen stood in the Pacific at dawn and pulled huge glittering sea bass from the clutching waves. Thumbs pressed on invisible lines, casting into the odysseys of the wind, splitting the sea with their flashy lures. They stood at their stations, stoic, tireless, accused. The real men of my childhood, reeling, 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 loading bloody mouths into gunnies, riding off in two-toned Chevys. Final whatever. Candle blowing out in a mirror. I'm suspended and incomplete. Winchester, whiskey, Ouija, gold-wrapped, bittersweet chocolates, silver pocket watch flipped open, balancing on the coffee-stained table. She's breaking again, through the window in rain, thunderbolts in her mouth, and this, my last stand, final whatever. The Empress, final whatever. She erupts in the room, the falsetto of oblivion, molten eyes, coming back from the dead for my heart. Okay, another one along the same line. This one is taken, it's a response sort of to a poem by a Palestinian author named Mahmoud Darwish. It's called The Unknown World. I glued together the pieces of a pot she threw at the wall. I pick up the pistol she left and unload all but one bullet. It had been holding down a poem I'd written while she slept. I tie a pair of her nylons in a knot and tuck them under her pillow. The pigeons, long quiet, begin to coo when again I welcome her back from the unknown. The bullet is for the demon. Now, that's an interesting point because I didn't have that last line, and I sent this poem to a priest that I knew. And he said, and he wrote back, he said, The bullet is for the demon. That was it. I had it. And because I didn't know what, I knew there was only one bullet left, but he said it's for the demon. Which she might be bringing back. Okay. Let me read the first poem, and then that will be the last poem. This is it's from the title of the book, This Particular Kiss. And by the way, these are for sale. I'm really not trying to make a lot of money on them. Normally they're $15, but I'm selling them here for $10. And if you buy both of them, it's $15. Okay? So that's the deal. Cold Kiss. I hear dead white leaf off key when he says, it's probably cancer. I dog ear this moment, crease the corner of this word, cancer, as it kisses me for the first time. Then, like spilled paint, I free fall through the architecture of death, cold prayers on my lips, only to find my son in his Star Trek t-shirt, his eyes climbing the ladder to my heart. We leave, sidestepping time, stuck to this particular kiss.
Thank you, John K. As he mentioned, 2 books for sale, $10 each or 2 for $15. What we're doing this evening is if you have a book that you want to purchase, they're going to take care of you in the bar next door. And we usually take about a 15-minute break after our feature, and then we'll be back for more open mic. And if for some reason you are not able to join us after the break, our next reading will be on July 14th. And on the podium here on your way out, there are some flyers for next month's reading if you're interested in having that or helping us spread the word about it, okay? So we'll see you in about 15. Thanks very much.